Thanks so much for joining us today and welcome to our workshop, Teaching Shakespeare and Performance Now. This workshop is focused on teaching global Shakespeare performance, Shakespearean text in performance, and Shakespeare on film. So we have a presentation from three of our Arden authors and editors. That's Alexa Alice Joubin, Mark Thornton-Bennett, and Abigail Roxon-Woodall, who specialise in Shakespeare and performance. And that will be followed by a discussion between them and you, our attendees, and they will each offer insights into their own teaching and provide tools for other teachers and researchers to use. So first, we'll hear from Alexa Alice Joubin, Professor of English, Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, Theatre, International Affairs, and East Asian Languages and Cultures at George Washington University. Alexa is the editor of the just-published Contemporary Readings in Global Performances of Shakespeare.
Good morning, good afternoon, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at today's Arden Bloomsbury webinar on teaching Shakespeare performance today. My name is Alexa Alice Joubin, and I will launch my new book just published by Arden Bloomsbury. I will also talk about the challenges that we face in teaching Shakespeare performance today and the solutions I will propose. What exactly are the end and the ends of global Shakespeare as a genre and a field of study? Could the notion have outlived its usefulness as a theoretical concept? We know that there are failures of globalism and internationalism on the social and economic levels. So teaching the subject of global Shakespeare today requires some rethinking of how the subject is presented and what the pedagogical goals we are aiming for. There are a couple of challenges, and I'm going to propose some solutions. I would first talk briefly about global Shakespeare. There actually has been centuries of performances of Shakespeare in many different languages, but in academia, global Shakespeare as a field rose only in the 1990s as a concerted effort to document this rich history. It coincided with neoliberal policies of unrestricted free trade and more affordable international travel. Political and economic globalism enabled a paradigm shift in Shakespeare studies. Scholars began to realize that the study of Shakespeare could go beyond textual criticism and elucidation of the meanings of the plays. And both textual criticism and embodied meanings have been enriched by each other. But scholars recently are questioning whether global Shakespeare has been co-opted for new forms of ethno-nationalism. Maybe global Shakespeare has expanded Shakespeare studies' Anglocentric outlook, but it, at the same time, has also been used as a neoliberal concept to bolster the West's claim to Shakespeare's universal value after the Cold War. So the question now is, how do we analyze diverse and polyphonic performances around the world with an eye toward equity and social justice issues? We need new methods to theorize performances of Shakespeare. One challenge we face is epistemic injustice. Coined by Miranda Fricker in 1999, epistemic injustice is social injustice that is induced by uneven knowledge. It results from the erasure of certain viewpoints or distortion of certain viewpoints or facts. It arises from uneven valuation or deferral to authority and unwarranted trust or distrust of certain sources. And so epistemic injustice undermines some messages in communication practices. There are primarily two types of injustices. Testimonial injustice refers to silenced voices. It occurs when one's voice is distrusted due to various biases. The second type, hermeneutical injustice, results from the misunderstanding of someone's experiences due to lack of interpretive resources. Cultures that have historically been excluded may become unintelligible And this is especially true of subjects that do not fit established categories. Amrita Sen has critiqued the uneven expectations of scholarly labor, where no footnote is required for Aristotle's Poetics, but every single thing that is indigenous would require very distracting footnotes. The phenomenon is known as the dreadful explanatory comma. Basically, explanatory comma is when you pause to explain something before continuing. Come to think of it, Aristotle may be better off with explanatory notes. We would do well to explain the transmission of Aristotelian misogyny into English culture through a translation of an Arabic treatise, for example. Likewise, analysis of white English language Shakespeare would be more on point by situating it not as a yardstick, but as a part of globalization. Scholars Sandra Young and Chris Berman, they have questioned whether a global Shakespeare has been complicit in some type of cultural appropriation, making performances elsewhere in exotic objects or even distractions. By Susan Bennett's estimation, global Shakespeare has often been instrumentalized to serve Western institutions to fulfill the so-called diversity quotas. And so this tendency is reflected in the habitual juxtaposition of global Shakespeare with English language Shakespeare, as well as in the editorial practices that ask scholars of color and those working on marginalized topics to explain subjects that do not fit with white Anglocentric worldviews. And there's a word for that. These inherited norms, right, from previous generations, from other structures, they're called structural conditioning by Mae McEwen. Structural conditioning results from the actions of previous generations that constrained people in the present by having created the structural conditions in which they can act. I refuse to accept this. We can counter the structural conditioning by promoting substantive diversity when we teach global performances, and we can eradicate epistemic injustice by directing students' attention to the rich works beyond what meets the eye. And so one strategy that I've come up with is teaching them to write what amounts to a type of alt text. We watch a short scene. We look at a still photo of a pivotal scene in a stage performance. We watch a video clip of a film. We discuss them and we try to describe in as much detail as possible what is happening to your friends who haven't seen this. So that's essentially what an alt text is. Originally, the notion of alt text emerged from web design. When you're designing a website, it is good practice, good inclusive practice to include descriptions of images or videos or audios that you have on any given web page. In case the page does not load as it is intended to, in case a user's internet connection is unstable and doesn't get the image, it's a broken link, then at least the alt text will be there as a type of caption. More importantly, for users who are accessing the net through a screen reader, for example, rather than visually, when they have screen readers read everything aloud to them, if you do not include an alt text, they will miss out on the illustration. And so when we do this, when we describe in detail the mise en scène or the cinematography of particular scenes in performances in all languages, including in English languages, we're actually putting English language performances on equal footing with non-English performances, and we're teaching English language Shakespeare as part of global Shakespeare. So building on this, we can then begin to develop a type of anthropological thick description to connect understudied regions, understudied genres, understudied adaptations, and begin to see their intricate intra-regional connections. And this will counter the colonial linear narratives that says Shakespeare emanated from England out to the rest of the world. We understand Shakespeare's travel actually is far more complex and meandering than this model would allow. An example on how to expand the conceptualization of global Shakespeare as a field and as a genre is that we can juxtapose and also connect understudied regions and works. Here you will see the poster of Akira Kurosawa's famous Japanese samurai film, Throne of Blood from 1957. It is an adaptation of Macbeth, and it has become very canonical. It has inspired many other works that respond indirectly to Macbeth, but directly to Kurosawa. So there's a whole Kurosawa universe, and on the right is only one of the many examples. It's Tunis Filho's Brazilian stage production, Trono, the Sangue from 1992. It is paying tribute to Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. Shown here is a scene of the witches at a spinning wheel, which is seen in the opening of Kurosawa. When you put works like this together with Shakespeare's Macbeth as one of the many interlocutors, things begin to change. You see networks instead of seeing a kind of linear progression of Shakespeare's genius as the ultimate original and everybody else's work as derivatives. So cross-cultural conversations are richer and more interesting in this regard. For example, we can think about how Armenian theater makers brought Shakespeare to Ottoman Turkey, and how Turkish performers in turn influenced Iranian adaptations of Shakespeare. It's such a beautiful, unpredictable, nonlinear path. We can also, in our teaching, use more diverse theoretical models beyond Western theories of adaptation. For example, we can think about the Brazilian theory of cultural anthropology, and present case studies without bracketing global performances as only oppositional to white performances. The theory of anthropology basically holds that when a culture encounters elements from other cultures, it's akin to a type of digestion process and ingestion, like eating. And then you would produce something new, but also echoes what you have eaten. I invite you to check out my open access, open education resource called screenshakespeare.org. This online book, Screening Shakespeare, I offer examples of how alt text can build a foundation for performance analysis and how it can lead to productive anthropological thick descriptions. And specifically, it is at this link. If you go to the theory tab and click on how to analyze films, you will see this particular section, writing and alt text, that provide all kinds of examples there. I wanted to say that alt text are actually a form of very productive collaborative learning. Think of the different levels of foreign language proficiencies available in our classroom. Think of our varied proficiencies and in other cultural histories, our experiences in other cultures. We can bring all this together and through teamwork, build larger scale knowledge. In other words, the faculty, the instructor should not be the only source of knowledge in the room. And I highly recommend Global Shakespeare as a collaborative, collective learning experience. Now, how does this initial kind of simple exercise of writing an alt text evolve into thick description to build critical analysis? first of all, we will start to pay attention to overlapping layers of cultural significance, while alt text would be specifically a lens of alt text is trained only on what is happening in the scene. When you develop it into a thick description, you are paying attention to the lineage, to the significance of particular props. If they use masks, is there a specific local cultural significance to that? And that requires some independent research, detective work. Take, for instance, if there's a performance of Hamlet that uses a skull in the grave digger scene. Now, what does this particular skull mean? Their use, does it connect to, does it respond to reject previous uses of the skull as a prop? And by thinking this way, in what we call a networked type of thinking, we can connect what is assumed to be siloed works. There might be undercurrents, there might be connections, more connections than first meet the eye. We can counter the emphasis of political meanings of global Shakespeare, as in they're only interesting politically as some kind of testimony, and begin to add aesthetic meanings to it and balance things out. So more specifically, what exactly is the thick description? First of all, there's the thin description, which is seen by anthropologists as photographic summaries of behaviors in a performance or in a social setting. Now, a thick description involves contextualization of motives for behaviors and reception of such behaviors. So it's not just what happens, but why certain things happen. According to Clifford Geertz, thick descriptions sort out the structures of signification and help us determine their social import. In other words, thick descriptions make the plausible believable in drama, and it is an important foundation to the study of performances. All of these are covered in my new book, Contemporary Readings in Global Performances of Shakespeare. And you can use SHAX30 as a discount code at checkout at bloomsbury.com for 30% off. So for 30% off of the already discounted paperback version, you can use SHAX30. I divided the book into 3 parts, and I've 15 contributors. The first part is a methodology section showcasing the application of thick description as method and how to use it to read translations without necessarily understanding, for example, Japanese, how to read world cinema. And we also propose strategies to read across borders, as you can see, as well as how to read Shakespeare and modernity with Turkey as an example. The second section brings us some big pictures, and this is important contextual information for us to be able to better write that thick description, such as the Latin American context, its history, its cultural history, colonial history, and these chapters offer snapshots of examples to elucidate the point, but primarily they give us macro history in what we call big pictures. Now, with the methodologies and big pictures under our belt, we are now equipped and ready to dig into case studies. So the last section is case studies, which include such Bollywood adaptation of Hamlet as Haida, or Korean shamanic rituals in performances of Hamlet. And you will see both the knowledge of macro history at work, as well as thick description that's covered in our methodology section here in these chapters, kind of showcases how to do things with global Shakespeare. You'll note that I made a point of including a chapter on UK and a chapter on Canada for I wanted to counter the misconception that global Shakespeare is merely what US and UK are not. I wanted to make a study of Shakespeare an integral part of global Shakespeare. That's what these chapters show the readers. Last but not least, in the coda, the final chapter, it's an interview by me of the scholar Catherine Hennessy, who has been practicing global Shakespeare and teaching global Shakespeare in Yemen, Kuwait, China, and many other places, 8 countries, in fact. We'll focus on A Midsummer Night's Dream. So highly recommend it. It's worth a read. And once again, you are all welcome to take advantage of the 30% discount with this particular code on the screen when you check out at bloomsbury.com. Thank you for joining us at today's webinar on teaching Shakespeare performance.
So thank you to each of our speakers for your presentations and for what you've shared, your expertise, each quite different approaches by those who joined us today.